Okay, I guess this is my second project of the summer that I've taken on. This is a vintage mini bike apparently that has been forgotten. A friend of mine picked it up at a garage sale cheap, and so Mike has asked me to bring it back to life. Obviously it needs an engine. It had a Tecumseh on it that was seized, didn't run at all. And he wants me to put one of those Harbor Freight engines on here, 6.5 horse. I know it's made in Taiwan. I saw that stamped on the frame. I could have swore I saw somewhere where it said Coleman, but I'm not sure about what brand of bike this started out as. It's had a few modifications done to it, as you can see. There was a jack shaft thing put on here that was sort of primitively welded down here, and I removed that because I don't think it's really going to work in this case. The bearing on this unit is not replaceable or greasable or anything, so I cut that off, and I'm just going to put on the old school jack shaft kit that you can buy. In this case it'd be for a number 41 chain, and it's the only way we're going to be able to make this work. Positioning the engine and the clutch and all that, and to give it enough torque. It's pretty heavy to get this thing up and moving. It's got a huge rear number 41 chain sprocket in the back, but even still I think the jack shaft will be necessary to make this thing be able to climb hills and everything that Mike and the kids want it to do. So I guess the first order of business is to get it cleaned up, and he wants me to paint it blue, so we're gonna do that next. Okay, the blue paint turned out pretty nice on this old mini bike. Covered up the red pretty well, I think, in most places. So we got that done. We got our jack shaft kit in the mail the other day, and now we've got to figure out how we're going to mock up these bearings. They're going to have to be welded in place, so I'm going to have to put the shaft in here and mock up the chain onto the sprocket and make sure that the chain tension, at least for the first, from the sprocket up here, is going to be correct, because it won't be able to adjust that really. There's a little bit of adjustment, it looks like, on the back here, which is nice. Moving the axle forward or back will help, but once these are welded into place, that's pretty much going to be where they're going to end up. So I'm going to do that next. So as you can see, I've started working nights on this project. It's getting into the fall here, and we're kind of running out of daylight as we go. Still working with this jack shaft, and as you can see, I've decided not to go with the bearings that come with this kit. I've never really been a big fan of that style of bearing. I've used them before on another mini bike and they did work out, but I felt that the pillow block bearing, a lot more adjustable. You can move it, north and south with the slots that are in there. It's a more durable bearing. It's got grease zerks, and so I've rigged up those on here with this jack shaft. I got rid of the original sprocket that was on here, which is a 14 tooth, and I'm now using an 11, just because this gigantic rear sprocket is at 66 teeth, which by my calculations and using a website calculator, it would be like a 9-to-1 gear ratio, which wouldn't allow really much for speed, just a lot of torque and probably popping a lot of wheelies. So by going to an 11 tooth here, I'm more in the 6 to 7-to-1 ratio, I believe. So had this plate welded on, and then I cut a groove for the chain, And then I had to make these spacers starting with 1/2-inch aluminum. And then we got some epoxy and some washers to get it up to a little over 1/2 inch. So that gives me the clearance I need for the sprocket to be up over this foot peg here. Otherwise there'd be an interference with the chain right about in this spot here if the jack shaft wasn't elevated at least that much. So I'll just be drilling some holes, positioning the pillow block bearings here, and then I'll be able to move it back and forth to tighten the chain as I need it. So after some careful measuring, drilling these holes exactly parallel with the rear axle, at least as best I could do, you know, with tape measure, T-square and all that. Mounted the bearings on the 1/2-inch aluminum spacers, and that allows me to line everything up, and bolted them down securely underneath with some thick washers underneath and some nylock nuts and some so I think we're in good shape as far as what we got going on the back. I just got to concentrate on getting the engine back in here and seeing how that lines up in chain tension for this outer sprocket. So first thing I did to this brand new Harbor Freight engine was remove the gas tank. Obviously way too big, never going to work on this chassis. So that was pretty easy. Next thing, pulled the side cover off and removed the governor. So what you end up with is this little piece that comes up and sticks through the top and attaches to this linkage here. And you unbolt that, and I ended up cutting a little bit off with a Dremel tool so that it would pop all the way down and fall out. So what's left inside here is this little plastic gear, which really should be removed also, just so that it doesn't break apart you know, while this thing is running at, who knows, maybe up to 5,000 RPM or so. And so I guess that's what I'm going to do next. I'm just going to button the cover back on and torque it to specs again, and move on for the rest and get a different gas tank for it. So okay, as you can see, pretty much done with the project on this restoration. I got a couple of custom touches I added. You know, we got the jack shaft, which is all hooked up now, and both chains on, clutch, and then there's the clutch cover. I put a little different air filter on this. This is a stock air filter, but I did drill some Swiss cheese holes in the top to get some more air in there, and then I found this piece of plastic at work just laying in the garbage that just looked like it would work to cover that up to make it a little bit more weatherproof. I can't assume that kids using this are going to leave it in a garage. They may leave it out in the rain, who knows. So I wanted to make that a little bit more weatherproof, but yet still get some more air in there. I'm going to rejet the carburetor to kind of compensate for that extra air and the fact that they're probably going to run this thing wide open. There's the very small gas tank. You know, obviously the stock one, huge. No way that was going to fit, so mounted that with some brackets on each side that went down to the where the other gas tank was, I guess. And hooked up the little kill switch that was on here already. And back here, the muffler is covered with this heat shield. Keep anybody from hopefully burning their hand on the muffler. Once the seat's on, you'll kind of see where it's positioned, but that's just a piece of kind of ornate metal you can get. And I just cut it to fit and bolted it down to the fender here. So pretty close to, I got a new throttle on here, and I guess I'm getting pretty close to starting it up and seeing how it works out. finished with the fixer-up restoration on this old vintage mini bike. Again, if anybody knows what model of mini bike this started out with, I would be curious to know, as I may have to buy a few parts possibly for the brakes, or front wheel definitely has some sort of wobble to it. I didn't find out until I test drove it here just a little bit ago, but it goes pretty good. The jack shaft is working out pretty well, and I got the miniature gas tank in here that I had to order. About the only thing that really fits properly on this. The original gas tank obviously was way too big. I do have a modified air filter on here, got a few holes drilled in the top to try to get a little more air in there. Still running the stock jet, different emulsion tube, I guess, and then I got this heat shield for the muffler to keep the kids from burning their hands on it. So overall pretty happy with the way it turned out. A lot of work, and so yeah, hopefully somebody out there sees this and can comment on what I know it's made in Taiwan, but other than that I don't know much about its history before this. So this header is for a Motovox, and it's usually just an under the seat header that seemed to work pretty well. I did have to move the fender down, and I had to cut a notch in the fender to make this fit. But that's the best header I could think of that would work for this setup. Just gotta put the clutch cover back on, and then gotta grease the bearings on these little blocks, and then the chain a little bit more, and deliver it. Hopefully he and the kids like it.